Welcome to the Edgar Allan Poe podcast with your co-hosts Vicky Ray, Nez, and Keith Chowgo. Exploring book to screen and everything in between, delving into the dark despair and the sinister world of Edgar Allan Poe.
Hello, welcome to Literary License Podcast, and today we're doing Edgar Allan Poe. We're dealing with The Black Cat from 1843, Morella from 1835, The Cask of the Amontillado, The Cask of the Amontillado from 1846, and The Facts of the Case of M. Valdemar from 1845, which also all became the 1962 film Tales of Terror, directed by Roger Corman and starring our favorites, Vincent Price, Basil Rathbone, and Peter Lorre. And let's see who we have with us today. It's just Vicky and myself. Hello, Vicky. How are you doing?
Hello. Greetings from the prison that is the U.S.
Yeah. So
Fun.
I guess we'll do our roses and thorns.
Yeah.
I'm past COVID-19, so I'm no longer going to be mentioning that. I'm over it.
I think we all want to be past it.
No more.
I just want to be happy again. I want the gym to open, for God's sake. Something. I just need exercise and sunlight. So.
And it's fucking pissing like cats and dogs here. I mean, downpour.
Nothing like adding insult to injury, that's for sure.
Precisely.
It rained the first month here. I mean, it was like 40 days and 40 nights. It was like one of the biblical plagues. On top of having the plague, we had another plague, and it was miserable. You couldn't go out. We were ready to all fucking kill each other in the first week. It's just like, no, we're not going to survive this, but we're still surviving.
Yeah, well, we're still alive, so that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's true. Sadly, other people aren't, but...
So, my mic is slipping. So, well, I guess we should do our roses and thorns. So, what is your roses and thorns of the week, Vicky?
Okay, well, my thorn is, it's not really because of the virus, but it's kind of indirectly. I usually like to go home. I plan to go home and see my parents about this time. And so we've decided we're probably going to wait till the bigger holiday season to probably do that because my parents mom turned 88 today. Dad will be turning 88 in July. So, I mean, if I get on a plane, God forbid, I infect anybody. But on the flip side, we still plan on coming to England and infecting the UK when we get off a plane. But that's June. We still don't know how that's going to play out. We'll see what happens. My daughter's held back on coming. And I'd have to say my rose is this friggin' fucked up movie that Matthew Breyer turned me on to called The Golden Glove. It's on Shudder. It's full of gore. It's seedy and filthy, and it was so disgusting. I actually felt like taking a shower after I finished watching it. I mean, it's like German, it's like European German horror, but it was a true story of this guy who was killing women, and he was putting them in his attic. And, and it was just nobody bathed in this movie. It was like Barfly meets Ted Bundy. It was disgusting. Everybody's hair was greasy. There was not one beautiful person in this movie at all, except this one blonde young girl who he has a fixation on. Other than that, I have never seen a movie in my life. I actually left a review for it, and I never leave reviews on Shudder most of the time, other than when we talk about them. But I mean, if you want to get all feeling dirty where you need to get a shower, this is the movie for you. It's really fucked up, but I loved it. And I mean, I was looking at my husband, and he was watching. I wish I could have took a picture of him. His jaw was on the ground through most of it. He didn't know what to think. And he's going, "You're not going to eat and watch this thing," because I was eating a snack or something. It's like, why, sure, I'm going to eat the whole thing. It didn't bother me. It was just like, thank you, Matthew. It was a great movie. Definitely a great pick. What about you?
My rose of the week has to be the Netflix series Afterlife, starring Ricky Gervais.
I heard about that. I heard it was great. I have not started watching it yet.
It's bloody brilliant. I really enjoyed that. That's probably the only thing I actually watched. My thorn of the week probably has to be RuPaul's Drag Race, because it's just too political for me. I'm sorry.
Oh man, he didn't go down that route too. I love RuPaul's Drag Race. I have not watched this year's yet, but I usually try to catch it when I can, because I just love watching these guys, dress up. I just wish somebody would do my makeup that was on that show. But I love the show, and God, man, I hate it when people just like, can't we just keep politics out of some of things? Just please, just leave it alone.
Well, it's a bunch of gays talking about how they're so oppressed, and I don't know. I don't want to get into it because I'll probably lose half of our listeners, but fuck you. But anyway, that's pretty much it, really, for me, as far as my rose and thorn. But I mean, my thorn is very, very weak. I don't really have a thorn. I've kind of gone.
I guess I'm tired of tired of the negativity. And when you put a thorn out there, it's really usually negative. And we've had so much negative for the last 6 weeks. I've just done in by negative. Seriously, there ain't enough sage in the world for this shit anymore. There really isn't.
No, I just kind of just forget about it now. I just kind of scroll through Facebook. So that's what I do.
Well, I did notice I do it too, that you just want to just throw something out there because it's going to piss a few people off. But I get great enjoyment at that, though.
I have to sit there and say that I found very interesting is when I did post something on Facebook about with the next the next wave of COVID-19 that all essential workers should go on strike.
Yeah, I don't.
And everybody that's in lockdown, but everyone in lockdown is supporting it. Everyone who isn't in lockdown goes, "How dare you? You're only thinking of yourself."
Right.
Figure that one out, people.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
anyway.
Well, I know a lot of people, including yourself, that are working in grocery stores and in the hospitals and in their truckers, and and then they
cut our bloody pay at work.
They did not.
They did too. Yeah, our pay got cut. So
that's
something for another day.
Wow, the balls, the big brass ones.
So what we're going to do is we're going to cut to Story Geek, who's going to tell you what to watch and what to download during the COVID lockdown crisis. Take it away, Story Geek.
What movies and TV shows should you be watching the week of April 27th? I'm Jay Shear, co-host of the Story Geeks podcast, and here are the movies and TV shows you can watch from home. Technically, this is the first week where we don't have any wide-release movies coming out to rent or buy. But of course, there's still plenty of great streaming content to check out. Here are some things you might be interested in. New to streaming this past Sunday, Penny Dreadful's City of Angels debuted on Showtime. I loved the original series with Eva Green, Timothy Dalton, and Josh Hartnett. It's a stylized horror drama that really worked for me. I don't have Showtime, but if I did, Penny Dreadful, City of Angels looks fantastic, and episode 1 has a 63 on Metacritic. Extraction, a film produced by the Russo brothers of Marvel Cinematic Universe fame, also came out last Sunday. The action sequences are intense, the cinematography is phenomenal, and the storyline, well, the storyline really doesn't matter. Just watch it for the action. Extraction stars Chris Hemsworth and has a 56 on Metacritic. For those of you who are more in the mood for nostalgia and comedy, check out the Parks and Recreation Reunion Special. That's coming out on Thursday, April 30th on NBC. As for my pick, if you don't want to think very hard, definitely check out Extraction. It's not very kid-friendly as the violence is pretty intense and the language is a bit rough, but you don't need to worry about following the story at all. If you've got kids and want to see one of the best comic book movies of all time, check out Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse on Netflix. Not only is it an outstanding film, it's the subject of the latest The Story Geeks podcast. We dig deeper into the Spider-Verse with Alan Ng from Film Threat. Watch the movie on Netflix and then find the Story Geeks podcast on your preferred podcast provider. Alan actually said it was the best conversation he's heard about Into the Spider-Verse. Until next week, this has been Jay Shear from the Story Geeks podcast, and I hope you have fun streaming movies and TV shows at home.
Hello, welcome back to the Literary License Podcast. And of course, we are dealing with Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, Morella, the Cask of
Cask of Amontillado.
Yes, well, every time we get that word, Vicky will say that word for me. And the facts in the case of M. Valdemar. And of course, we're doing the Tales of Terror film from 1962. So, I guess what we should do is before we get on to this, we want to thank you, Story Geek. We will have an ad from Story Geek talking about what book you can get for very cheap, and all the money that they raise from this book will be going to charity. So I suggest you download this 99p until lockdown's over with, and after lockdown, this will go up to £9. So your
What's it called again?
I will have to look at my notes. I don't have.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't put you on the spot, buddy.
Don't worry, it'll be in the ad soon. The ad will be
Okay.
pretty soon. I'll let you know during the ad. So something about the galaxy, So I guess that brings us to Edgar Allan Poe's The Black Cat, which was published in 1843. This short story is by American writer Edgar Allan Poe, of course. It was first published in August 19th, 1843. It was editions Saturday Evening Post. It is a study of the psychology of guilt upon paired and analysis with Poe's telltale heart. And both the murderer carefully conceals his crime and believes himself unassailable, but eventually breaks down and reveals himself impelled by a nagging reminder of his guilt. Now, people, if you are a constant listener of our show, you realize that we did Black Cat last month. So I would suggest, if you want to hear all our nice understandings and all our ideas about Black Cat, the short story, please refer back to that. But I could tell you, for one, that all of us really liked it. It's a fantastic story. It's a really good read. And we suggest that you read that or listen to our podcast and actually read it.
Basically, is don't get drunk and kill your cat.
No, because that cat will come back to you with a vengeance. Well, our next short story is Morella, which is a short story in the Gothic horror genre by Edgar Allan Poe again. It basically deals with a woman who this man's fully in love with, but becomes very bored with her. And basically what happens is that she dies on her as she's giving birth to another mini-me of her, and to the point where he wants the daughter to just die. So that's pretty much it. So Vicky, let's talk about Morella. So what are your thoughts of Morella?
Well, I thought that the guy, Poe is just so hard to follow sometimes. I did notice, though, that this guy is madly in love with her. He just hangs on her every word. He thinks she's totally an enlightening female for the times. And then he just gets sick of her when she gets sick. You know, it's just like, well, that's kind of shitty, actually. But I didn't really realize, was she ill in the beginning? Because I said, I love Poe. And sometimes I have a hard time following him. And so I have to get out the Cliff Notes kind of thing and cheat a little bit because, we're talking about the 1840s and stuff, and things just were written so much differently. And he is one of my favorite authors. But I was trying to figure out Morella, is she pregnant? Is that why she's dying, or is she ill and she becomes pregnant?
She gets. Well, that's what I got a bit shaky on that as well. I know she dies during childbirth.
Right.
And I'm assuming that basically when she died during childbirth is, so I'm assuming that she probably got ill because of childbirth, because it is 1835.
Right. Well, yeah. It's hard giving birth now as opposed to that. I can't imagine having to give birth back then. I just fuck that. Nope.
Yeah, long before the epidural.
Not back then.
I mean, for me, I I know that the major theme is Poe features dead or dying women in many of his tales. Bernays, Ligeia, Fall House of Usher, Elnora.
Well, I think it's kind of relevant to his wife suffering too. I think wasn't she suffering at this time? It took 4 years for her to die of tuberculosis, did it not?
Yeah, and then they always get resurrected or they communicate from the grave. I mean, that's kind of the major theme. But the funny thing about this is that this kind of reminds me, if I was going to look at this in more psychological terms, and the thing is that normally people have children, and then what happens is normally if the child doesn't get on with the mother, or the mother doesn't get on with the child, or the father doesn't get on with the child, is because that child is a mini-me version of them. It's like a mirror brought up to them.
Right.
And so for this story, I looked at it more like when the daughter was born and she became so much like her mother. And all the stuff that, even though he loved his wife to the point where he got to the point where his love actually turned to hate for his wife, because
his major resentment.
Because,
for sure.
Yeah, and I think what happened is that when a mini-me version of her was born, all of a sudden it's like all the resentment he has for his wife was brought back up in his daughter. And so I kind of thought this is more like an allegory, kind of a story about people and their children and giving birth, because you ever remember Poe never had children.
No.
And sometimes people give birth so they can have a mini version of themselves to bring into the world to help bring on, to carry on their face and their livelihood and their personality and bring that to the next generation. And for me, I picked this up as this was Poe looking at this, because I don't think he was much of a child person. He never had children. You don't have
like it,
unless you include marrying his 13-year-old cousin, as far as knowing anything about children. But then again, we do get the Poe twist, is that when the girl dies, his daughter dies, is that they go to Morella's crypt and Morella's body's missing.
Right.
So we do get that supernatural element into Morella.
Well, you get the name too. The name has a root word, like Morel is a name of a black nightshade. And we all know that's like a poisonous weed. But it also derives from a place called in Pressburg, which is now Bratislava. And it's supposed to be the reputed home of black magic, where Morella is said to have received her education. So she's already kind of dark and unearthly, I guess, in his story, just by breaking down her name. So he was just dark. I mean, it's sort of like Edgar Allan Poe just equivocates death. I mean, there's never a happy ending. I don't think I've seen one happy ending in all of the stories I've ever read, not unless you know something I don't. Did he ever break from the norm?
I guess the closest we got so far, probably the Rue Morgue, murder the Rue Morgue, because that he solves the crime.
Yeah.
But it's not really a happy ending. It's about a gorilla who murders 2 women.
Don't even get me going on the movie. I just keep thinking of the old version of the movie where they had the chimpanzee and they flash back to the guy in the monkey suit.
Chimpanzee, then gorilla, then chimpanzee again, then a gorilla. But the other day, it's supposed to be an orangutan. A black orangutan, which I don't think there's no such thing as a black orangutan.
Not unless it's some kind of weird biology.
All the orangutans I've seen have been ginger, which is a problem in itself. But
creepy. I love a rat. They're cute though. Right turn, Clyde.
I mean, what I did like about Morella, it was very short, to the point, and it hit all its. There wasn't a lot of flowery language. It was a very easy read. I mean, I think I read this halfway to work, and I had it finished just like, because I knew that we had like 4 stories coming up.
Right. Like, it didn't take me long to knock this one off. Like I said, I was only kind of confused about, was she sick already when she had the baby, or did the pregnancy make her sick? Because he doesn't really say why all of a sudden she has a baby. So, but it just seemed he had a lot of resentment for mom. So when the daughter started looking like mom around her 10th birthday, he didn't even name the child. He didn't name her till, he named her Morella at her christening. And that's when, the child dies. So it's just all creepy.
Yeah, it's very, very odd. I mean, obviously, he's a person who probably
What do you call her? Pretend. What do you call somebody? Pretend. Hey, you.
Hey, you. What's her name? What's her name? So.
Come here, you little bastard.
Come here, you little bastard. You little bitch. Come here. So, but I mean, overall, I like the short story. Actually, I've never read it before. I didn't really know. I wasn't really
I've never
wasn't
read it
really
either.
familiar with it, but I actually liked it, actually. So
I liked it.
And I guess that now brings us to the cask of, what's that word?
Amontillado.
Amontillado, which sometimes spelled the Cask of Amontillado. It is a short story, of course, by Edgar Allan Poe. It was first published in November 1846, issue of Gaudy's Lady's Book. The story is set in an unnamed Italian city at a carnival time in an unspecified year. It's about a man taking fatal revenge on a friend who, he believes, has insulted him. Like several of Poe's stories, and in keeping with the 19th century fascination with the subject, the narrative revolves around the person being buried alive, in this case by immurement, as in The Black Cat and Telltale Heart. Poe conveys the story from a murderer's perspective. Now, as far as this story is concerned, I thought the story was very, very clever.
It was.
Because, first of all, here we got someone who is a murderer. He's planning this murder, and he plans it so perfectly that basically he makes it seem like it's the guy's idea to do it.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? This is it's like he finds this person that he wants dead, and basically what he does is you're almost like to the point where he makes it his own idea to. There's almost like the guy who's getting murdered. It's his idea to go to the cellar. It's his idea to get drunk. It's his idea to. And I thought that was very, very clever. I think that's what makes the story quite clever.
Well, he starts coughing and stuff. He goes, well, if you don't feel well, we're not going to continue on. But apparently, I guess this is a special vintage Amontillado. I've never actually drank any of it, so I don't know what's so special about it. But he really wants to go forward. And even one of the critics of the story said that the guy deserved to get walled up because he should have never been drunk in wine tasting anyway.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we got a real big heart of an audience. So the guy said he deserved it. So, yeah. But it was very clever.
The thing is, the guy is, it's kind of a weird one, actually, because you don't really know anything about you don't know anything about either one of them, actually. No. You don't know what the guy that he's angry with and that wants to murder, you don't know anything about him.
Well, I think he thought he gave him an insult, and apparently there was some jealousy, too. Something about he was one of the, a Mason, so he probably had a higher station in life, and this guy was just jealous.
See, I also read this as like old money versus new money.
Possibly, yeah.
And the murderer's old money, and this guy's new money, because it's like, even though this guy has money, he's very gauche with it all, and he's very all in your face, and it's all about trying to live up to Joneses. So it's almost like, and even like when he drinks the liquid,
Amontillado, the Amontillado.
I don't know why my brain can't put that word in. But even when he drinks it, it's kind of like he like guzzles it. He doesn't savor it. He just guzzles it. So it's almost like, I guess it's a bit like having someone who says they know a lot about wine coming to your house, and you serve them this expensive wine, but they really don't know anything about it at all.
They gulp it and don't enjoy it. I've never really. I like wine, but actually, it has. If it's not like Pinot Grigio or Pinot Noir or whatever like that, most wines are just they're really kind of nasty tasting. A lot of people love it, but a lot of it's just it's you really gotta like it, I guess. But
I don't know anything about wine at all. I don't drink alcohol, so
I'm thinking things are a lot more stouter back then. I was laughing. I know we're not going to get to the movie just yet, but I just kept thinking of Vincent Price when I was reading the story. I couldn't get the face he made out of my head, and I was just laughing to myself. And the thing is that they go in a lot more in depth into the Cask of Amontillado, and they do a lot of the others. And they were talking about there's an apocryphal legend apparently about the story. Apparently, Poe had gotten the idea when he was stationed at a private island. I think it was Fort Independence in 1827. And it said, according to legend, he saw a monument to a Lieutenant Robert Massey, and he had been killed in a sword duel, apparently, by another lieutenant following a dispute about a card game. And it said that the other soldiers took revenge on Drain by getting him drunk, luring him into a dungeon, chaining him to a wall, and sealing him in a vault. So apparently there was some kind of back-ass truth to this. So people actually do this, I guess, in real life back in the 1800s. I don't know.
Well, they didn't have television or Netflix, so I guess you had to amuse yourself some way.
Yeah, true.
Let's invite next door neighbor and wall them in behind one of the walls in the basement.
Can you imagine? I mean, I'm already a claustrophobic person. And I mean, either watching movies about people that do this and just watching the last brick go in, I always think, oh my God, what could possibly go into your mind with somebody who's this cruel? That's a horrible way to kill somebody.
Well, the only thing is you don't even suffocate, you just starve to death.
Basically. And he sobered up rather quick when he realized what was going on. Apparently.
Well, yeah, but he did sober up when he got down to the last brick, so it took him a while to sober up.
Yeah, I bet building a wall would take a while, if you're a Mason. And not to
but I
mention
have to sit there and say that he was very meticulous, the guy. I mean, he had everything planned from like point A to point B. He was probably like the perfect murderer because he had everything so planned from the beginning to, making sure all the material was there, getting him drunk, getting him behind the wall, walling it all up, and then making it look like the stuff was always there and making sure that all the dust and everything covered everything up.
A lot of thought went into it. And I don't know if you've ever been
Precisely.
through the catacombs of France and places. Those things really, they're pretty big. And if wherever these catacombs were, I mean, no one's going to hear you in there. For the most part, no one back then probably ever ventured into them. So you're dying in darkness and alone in the cold and the damp. At least he could have done was left some freaking vino for him so he could just drink himself to death as opposed to freaking suffering.
So, yeah, it's a very interesting story. But this is another really easy read story, actually. I really enjoyed this one as well. So,
yeah, it is. I didn't know that Poe he probably knew how to do bricklaying through personal experience.
Yeah,
Many periods in Poe's life, they say, lack significant biographical details, including what he did after leaving the Southern Literary Messenger in 1837. So maybe he had to go out there and actually labor before he actually started getting a lot of his stories out. But this is one of his better stories because a lot of thought went into it. And I was wondering, do you think he was thinking of Donne when he was doing this? Because it was kind of a letter to, Tom Dunn, English, I believe.
Yeah.
Because they had a lot of confrontations. They kind of hated each other. And I think that, did Dunn or did English write the story first to piss off Poe, and then Poe wrote this to piss him off? Or
yeah.
He said that year English published a revenge novel called 1844, The Power of the SF. Convoluted and hard to follow. I've not read it myself, but apparently these guys did not like each other.
But at the end of the day, Poe won because we're discussing Poe today, and no one even knows what happened to Dunn. Never read a Dunn. Never don't know anything you've written.
Till I started looking through this and looking up.
Now he's a footnote in Edgar Allan Poe's life.
Yeah, he is a footnote, actually. He's like number 20 for footnotes.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it's a great story. It's a claustrophobic story because you know what's going to happen to this guy. And a lot of thought went into it on the part of the murderer, and he never got caught. And then he goes back, was it how many years later? Was he just unwall it and see, just to look to see if he's like still hanging?
I guess you just see if the wall's still in place, I guess you would know if everything's still there.
It's not like they had DNA testing back then to even catch him.
To be honest, I mean, if you don't read it, I'm sure that if they've uncovered him, there'd be a story in the newspaper somewhere. Man found behind brick wall. So.
Oh my God. Can you imagine? Some people probably deserve it though. Who knows?
Well, our next story is The Facts in the Case of M. Vladimir.
I love
which
this
is a short story about a mesmerist who puts a man in a suspended hypnotic state of the moment of death. An example of tale of suspense and horror is also to be certain example of it's also certain degree a hoax, as it was published without claiming to be fictional, and many at the time of the publication in 1845 took it to be a factual account. Poe toyed with this for a while before admitting it was a work of pure fiction in his Marginalia. Now, this is quite interesting because this is kind of like the first thing about based on a true story when you know it's told a hokum. Well, to be honest, movie lore would actually take this and run with it. A lot of things like paranormal activity, etc., etc. This story kind of freaked me out a little bit.
I actually like this story a lot. I thought
I like it a lot. But could you imagine like being dead and being dead stuck in your dead body as it's decaying?
I know. But actually, yeah. I mean, that's the freaky part about it, and the fact that the body was kind of like visibly kind of in some kind of suspended state, but it wasn't alive. But I mean, will your supernatural self not go to the pearly gates, or you think that you could actually be hypnotized into sticking around in a rotting corpse? You know, I mean, let's face it, Poe is. He's such a morbid author. I mean, if you could think of anything, you know, more, I mean, that's why I like this. It was a great read. It was an easy read. Mm-hmm. And it was just really interesting. And it was funny because people actually thought that this was some kind of medical report, I guess.
Well, it does read like a scientific journal. I have to say that. But you know what I thought was quite interesting? It reads like a scientific journal, but it wasn't dry like a scientific journal.
Right.
It's very, I mean, I have to say, I mean, these 4 stories that we're covering today, they were very easy reads.
Right.
I mean, you know, and they were very quick, very fast. I think I've read all of them within like 40 minutes, all 4 of them. So it didn't take
I knocked them all off in like about 40 minutes. I had to go back and reread a couple paragraphs because with Poe, you know, he gets some kind of confusing because of the day and, you know, the time and the way he writes. But I mean, I love his short stories as opposed to his longer stories because I can really get the short stories a whole lot quicker than having to go back and reread and cheat and, you know, do cliff note kind of things to get me through the story. But this one,
well, they've been edited really well down, and I have to say that I mean there have been a couple of short stories of his that were a little bit difficult to get through. I found like Fall of the House of Ushers.
Yeah.
It was kind of a bit windy. And Mask of the Red Death, though I did enjoy it, wasn't it? I mean, Hot Frog was very easy. So compared the two, it's like Mask of the Red Death kind of like had its flowery writing. But this is kind of like, I mean, I guess these 4 stories, I guess, is where you can see where the modern novel was going. Because all of a sudden, it's like all the flowery stuff is kind of missing. You know, it's all kind of like, you know, and you can see where the modern novel is about to take over, you know, in about another 10, 15 years. So it shows you how far ahead Edgar Allan Poe really was as far as his style of writing.
He had a lot of authors of the day give him creds for it, like Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Rudyard Kipling and George Edward Woodbury. I mean, there was a lot of people that really enjoyed this because it was such a horrific story. Can you imagine being hypnotized and you're dying and your consciousness, which is supposed to move on, can't move on, and you're making these guttural, horrible sounds, you know, when the house is hearing it. It's like, I'd be gone. There's just no way I'm staying in that house.
Well, I mean, this is 1845's version of War of the Worlds by Orson Welles as well.
Basically.
If you think about it, I mean, everyone who's reading it thought this was a true story.
Yeah,
you know?
That's true.
You know, it's like, oh, you have to read this. This is horrible. This is true. This could happen to you. You can get stuck in your body and not pass.
Yeah, he let it go for a while, too. He kind of let it, you know, linger on probably a little longer than he did before he come out and said, hey, you know, it's a story.
Well, this is an era where they were basically, you know, people had to have bells, you know, that was a string that went down into their casket in case they woke up and they were buried alive. And there's just all that whole buried alive side of things.
What's it called? It's not rigor mortis, but there's this, you're like in suspended animation. You're not dead, but everything is less labored.
I think it's called Walt Disney-fied.
Walt Disney, yeah, maybe. That could be
it. I mean, that's an urban myth, isn't it? That he's suspended in animation.
That's true. I forgot about that. No one can just sort of like Elvis. There's some people nobody wants to think is dead, like Michael Jackson. There's sightings all over Nevada. Michael Jackson, Elvis. Who else is another big one? There's a couple of them, but we all know we all know Elvis is gone. Elvis is dead.
Michael Jackson. Well, I'm sure if he is alive, to be found in a small boy's bed near you.
What a creepy thing to have. What movie was that they were making fun of him where he's showing up and he was in under the shroud?
Yeah.
And he just like shows up and they're making fun of that movie, oh gosh, what was it? That's going to drive me nuts now.
The Ring or something like that. It's one of those scary movie films, wasn't it?
It's a scary movie, but they're making fun of that movie about where Nicole Kidman's in it. Oh my God, that's going to
The Others.
The others, yeah.
The others,
He's
yeah.
underneath that thing. You think it's going to be that scary woman, and it's Michael Jackson. Whoever did it looks just like him too. But definitely, I love the story, and the end is kind of horrific. You know, he he wants to be dead. Was he screaming? He's dead, dead. And the narrator, who is also the mesmerizer, is he not?
Yeah.
He wants to bring him out of it, because how long did they keep him like that? Was it like a few months or something?
Well, his body was decaying, so that was for a while.
Yeah, but his brain was,
because they did discuss like the smell of the body rotting and stuff like that.
Yeah, and he was still conscious, but he wasn't. He knew he was dying when they put him under. That was just such a creep. Where does he come up with this shit? I mean, what was he thinking back then? And then again, his wife at that time was dying of tuberculosis, and he kind of always kind of mirrors that in some way, you know, in all of his stories, because I think he was really, a lot of people died on him. And I think that's probably why he's such a morbid author, because he really is morbid.
Well, to be honest, this also fits his themes of being buried alive, doesn't it? Because he does have quite a stories of being buried alive. You know, the black cat buried alive, though vertically behind a brick wall.
Right.
The cask buried alive behind a brick wall. Morella, it's like, well, you know, she kind of was reborn into a child who had a horrible life and then dies, and then the mother's
body's
gone.
Missing. Yeah.
So,
yeah. What happens to the body in that one, though? I mean, was it supernaturally switched, or did he do something with it? So there's a lot of questions of that story too. But
yeah, I guess it's like a kind of doppelganger. It kind of reminds us of that movie we did with Will, The Possession.
Yeah,
remember that? You know, it was like it kind of reminded that, where it's like they die, but they were kind of reborn into this other being, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Whatever the hell that was, I still can't figure that film out. I enjoyed it, but I'll never figure that out.
And Valdemar was dying by tuberculosis, you know, and they had attempts to postpone his life. Again, they say the experience of his wife Virginia. You know, she'd been suffering for 4 years, and I'm told that's just like a horrible way to suffer. I guess you just can't get your breath. Your lungs eventually are turning to stone. You know, it's God, man. God, man, I just don't think I'd want to live back then. Everybody goes, oh, I just love to experience, like we do Dark Shadows. You know, you got Victorian Winters. I just want to live in this historical period. And it's just like, well, everybody dies of these horrid freaking diseases. You know, it's like, no, I don't want to.
Well, I mean, you know, let's face it. I mean, there was a modern medicine. When you're sick in bed, it's not like being sick in bed now where you like turn on the TV, or you got your computer, laptop. Or when I was growing up, when I was sick, when I was growing up, you got your pillow, you got your blanket, you went down to the sofa and watched television with family. You know what I mean?
Your ginger ale and your dry toast from mother.
Yeah, and then, but you know, in those days, you just laid in your bed with nothing. It's like not like you could read. You know what I mean? And it probably were damp and cold all the time because you only have the fireplace, you didn't have central heating.
No.
So it'd been pretty horrible.
What a dark dismal. I mean, it couldn't have been all dark and dismal. I'm sure there was some bright lights, you know. Even
I don't know. I mean, season 4 will be covering a lot of literature from this time period, and none of it's very rosy.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, just like right down to the Bronte sisters and whatnot. I mean, they it's just all dark. I mean, It's all dark, gothic, whatever. I mean, and they were definitely obsessed with the supernatural back then, including Poe. I mean, I always wondered why. Is it because it's not like they could turn on Ghost Adventurers or Taps or something on TV, but they had
I think it has to do with like they were more educated, weren't they? So you had those people who were more educated, so they wanted a reasoning for why they're here. Why are we living? Why are we here? Because because they're educated, I think the supernatural and things like that made them more interested. That maybe it'd give them a clue of why we exist. Why was I born? What am I doing here? What does it all mean?
But they had a more healthy biblical fear of God back then too. I don't think you were allowed to really question the Lord Jesus as your savior back then. And I think it was more Old Testament kind of fire and brimstone religion back then.
Well, they wanted an afterlife as well. An afterlife was everything. You behaved yourself, and you had your religious thingy, but they wanted proof that there was life after death, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the reason why it wasn't so much about spirits and stuff like this.
No, people
but at the
now.
same time, they were digging up bodies and realizing that there'd be scrapings and underneath the coffin. Now, but the thing is, they didn't realize is that most of that probably was the electric neurons in the brain being shut off, and there's body spasms. So it's not like you're actually.
I don't know. Years ago, when I was like a sophomore in college, I had a teacher that I was in an archaeology class. It was like we'd have to do field schools and stuff like that. The police had found bodies, like it was out in the middle of somewhere. By the farmer just happened to tell them up there's bodies there, and they asked us to come to check it out first, make sure was it an old colonial family plot or did somebody commit mass murder? I never forgot this either because I felt bad for all these dead people. They ended up in the lab and they're probably still there after all these years. But there was this one where you could really tell that, there was like some of the cloth was in the mouth, and I remember this one skeleton particularly because it had blonde hair and it was just, I was like freaked out as a kid back then. Needless to say, it sent me to the nearest beer ball when I got back to my room. But, this person was probably buried alive. So I can see why it would actually happen because they didn't know. And I mean, they didn't. I mean, I thought, is that why they left you out for so long? You know how they had the day they just put you out there for 3 days? They just want to make sure you're dead, or do they just throw you in the ground back then?
I don't know. I mean, they didn't embalm, so.
No.
I mean, nowadays we embalm, so if you get put in the ground, you've been embalmed. So.
Well, I always wonder why you see the old Olivia de Havilland movies and movies of that era, and you see all the smoke, in the movie, and that's because probably things are getting kind of ripe, and that's probably what they're portraying in that. Because even back then, my mother has pictures. My mother's mother died when she was 2. It was like 1934, and Italians were morbid too. Sorry, Ma. But they took pictures of her so my mother would remember her, and you could see the smoke.
Well, they used to take pictures of people in their coffins as well, didn't they? So.
They still do. A lot of people do.
I mean, my mom wanted to be cremated when she died because her best friend, June, that's 50s names, but basically her mother, June's mother, had to be exhumed for whatever reasons, and when they opened up the casket, apparently there's all these claw marks on the side, and that stuck with my mom so much that she said that she didn't want to be buried. She wanted to be cremated because of that experience. And I think she was in her 20s when that happened to her, so it's not like she was young and it haunted her through her life.
No way. Even back then, see, you would think people would have figured it out. When would she possibly die? Maybe the 60s, 50s.
Probably 50s. My mom. I mean, I was born, so I guess it'd be 67 when they exhumed the body. But then I don't know how long the mother was dead for 20 years.
Why did they exhume her? For God's sake!
I'm not quite sure. My mom didn't really go into that. She just told us that story over and over and said that she wanted to be.
Well,
cremated.
yeah, but then again, getting cremated has its drawbacks too. What if you wake up and you're in the oven? Because that could kind of suck as well, So
yeah, but it's gonna be quite quick though, isn't it? The bodies aren't being cremated for very long. I think it's only it only takes like a minute or two. So obviously,
I don't think I think it takes a little longer than that. I'm not sure. That's just something really nasty. I'm gonna have to Google now. It's good. I hate it when I have to do stuff like that. We always come up with these sick, twisted things every time I talk to you, and then I end up Googling all this shit. It's like no wonder I don't sleep at night, man.
So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut to the film trailer for Tales of Terror. And then we're also going to cut to the commercial about how to get that book that we discussed earlier. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Every drop of blood feels the freezing paralysis of fear, almost stopping your heart, as Edgar Allan Poe unfolds his tales of terror.
You will meet the master of the mansion, who loved and protected his wife with the strength of a supernatural love. even beyond life itself.
I am in command here. You will do as I say. I shall take what I desire. Your body and your soul if I demand it.
Enough! Help! Help!
Then you'll enjoy the Black Cat's sardonically humorous tale. It all started at the Vintners Convention, where the lover of wine met the professional wine taster and introduced him to his wife, a darling who delighted in dalliance.
What kind of a man are you anyway? Make love to my wife and doesn't even talk to me.
You're insane!
That may be, but very clever.
Help! Help! Help!
In this monstrous mausoleum of the living, you will witness fury far worse than a woman scorned. The fury of a dead woman's jealousy.
Sorry for the brief interruption, but I wanted to give you a gift. This is Jay Shear, author of the Amazon top-selling time travel novel Time Slingers and co-host of the Story Geeks podcast. We just released the Kindle edition of Death of a Bounty Hunter, our new supernatural steampunk western novel, and I'd love for you to have it. With so many of us staying at home, we wanted to give you something. So we released the book early and discounted it to just 99 cents. You can learn more at deathofabountyhunter.com, but here's Mockingbird Preacher Witch, a character from the novel, to tell you what it's about.
This isn't a story about the man-ogre with a Gatling gun for an arm, or the Taiwan sorceress covered in tattoos, or even the long-winded banker. And while the speedster idiot and the large, very funny Pinkerton detective lady do play a role, it's not about them either. You might think this tale is about the Sheriff of Jericho, a man who will do just about anything to save a loved one, including work for a secret occultish society. And then there's a woman who bears the brunt of his sins and must defend herself when she's most vulnerable. All those characters appear in the story. I do too. But it's about more than that. The one I was assigned to, the Korean bounty hunter, he's at the dead center of it all. Flint, a bounty hunter who comes face to face with something we all do. Guilt and shame. And the desire to run from them. Not because we're cowards, but because sometimes we just can't stand ourselves. It's a story about that. The Gatling guns, the occult, the paranormal, and even the demon spawn. All those are just along for the ride. Mockingbird Preacher Witch. Like I said, I'm in the story. Just read it.
Mockingbird Preacher Witch is voiced by Anastasia Washington in the full cast audiobook coming out later this summer. Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoy this gift from us to you while you stay at home. To get the Kindle edition for just 99 cents, visit deathofabountyhunter.com. That's deathofabountyhunter.com.
Hello, welcome back to the Literary License Podcast, and now we're talking about Tales of Terror, which is a 1962 American international horror film in color and Panavision, produced by Samuel Zay Arkoff and James H. Nicholson, and Roger Corman, who also directed. The screenplay was written by Richard Matheson, and the film stars Vincent Price, Peter Lorre, and Basil Rathbone. It is the fourth in the so-called Corman-Poe Cycle of 8 films, largely featuring adaptations of Edgar Allan Poe stories, and directed by Corman for AIP. The film was released in 1962 as a double feature with Panic in Year Zero. Now, I guess the best way it is, I guess we just talk about the film in whole and just and throw in how we compare it with the throw it in how we like it with the short stories. And I have to sit there and say, I really like this little film.
I loved it. I love Vincent Price. I thought he just totally rocked this whole every scene or whatever. He was just He just killed it in this one. I don't care. I saw that it got some bad reviews. People weren't happy with it. But I mean, I really enjoyed this movie, and I just can't recall ever watching it before. I'm sure I have. I just don't remember. Sign of age maybe. But I really like this movie. I watched it twice. I liked it so much because I thought I love Vincent Price in this, especially in the, when
it's a tour de force for him, isn't it? He's in all three movies.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you do get Peter Lorre and you get Basil Rathbone. And
there's quite a few people in here. And you had,
Debra Paget as well.
Yeah.
And this film is very, very clever. Morella sticks pretty closely.
Yeah.
We kind of into when the daughter comes there, but then it just kind of changed things up. But it still has the spirit of Morella in it.
Right.
But I thought the best thing here was how they took the Black Cat story and the cask, and they put the two together. Yeah, Cask of Amontillado, and they put the two of them together. And I thought that was very, very clever to do two short stories, keep the essence of both short stories, and slide them together to make one film, to make one segment. I thought that was very well done.
Right. I did too. It was, and they actually made it a little more interesting because, I mean, well, the Black Cat, although I love that story, it was kind of nice seeing them stick them together because they kind of really complemented each other the way Corman stuck them together.
Mm.
And it kind of made sense, even though I don't know. Like I said, when I was reading the Cask of Amontillado, I could not get that stupid look off Vincent Price's face where he's tasting the wine and he makes that fish thing and he goes, he makes that. And then they're drunk and he's trying to bring him home, Peter Lorre home. And he keeps saying, "You're my best friend."
And my best friend ever. This is my life. She doesn't give me any money. Peter, and I love Peter Lorre. I mean, the thing is, it's funny, but you look at Peter Lorre in all these classic horror films, and he always plays kind of a bumbling, kind of jovial kind of person. And he's always brilliant, but he always plays his odd character. But have you ever seen Peter Lorre in the first film he did called M, which is like a British 1930 film where he's
I've seen it.
Child killer?
Nope, did not see it.
I mean, it's a very, very effective film, and I suggest watching this because this shows Peter Lorre in a totally different light. Because it's just called M. Yeah, it's about this child killer, and he kills a child, and then the whole town are searching for him, and he's running from the whole town. Really, really good film. One of those German expressionistic films, and it does have sound, and it's fantastic film.
He's creepy looking anyway. I bet he was a really nice man in real life.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, he had a sad life, though. I think he died. I think he was an alcoholic when he died. So we did have those bug eyes. And another thing I always remember about Peter Lorre is that in Bugs Bunny, they always had like the Peter Lorre character. You know, when they would do like, "This is Hollywood with Bugs Bunny," and they would say and they always had a Peter Lorre character in there.
They had quite a few characters. I forgot about those. God, I haven't seen those in like eons.
No, that's quite sad that they kind of got lost in the shuffle.
They did. I kind of just miss the old cartoons. I even miss the Disney cartoons. Everything has gotten so high tech, and it's like whatever.
Well, that's why you need Disney Plus.
I know. Everybody keeps telling me I need to get it. I just need to steal my daughter's account.
Precisely, to steal your daughter's account. Your daughter, I think you get like 4 accounts on Disney Plus. So.
Yeah, I just need to be, what do you call it, elite or something.
Yeah, just have her add you to her account. So
yeah, she's always over here and casting something to the TV. There's always something good on Disney Plus. Not that I'm really advocating Disney, but it just seems like it's a great subscription to have because they got something on there for everybody actually.
Mm. But I guess with Tales of Terror, I think that the Morella storyline I enjoyed because it was kind of odd, but it wasn't my favorite. I thought Morella was kind of the weakest in the trilogy.
A little bit. Well, they stick to it for the most part, but Vincent Price is decrepit old drunk basically. And could they not they didn't spare any expense with the cobwebs at all. There was like cobwebs. You could tell this place is dirty and unkept, and it's like, who fed this guy? And it's like, well, who's getting his booze? I mean, is he buying it? I mean, because he's drunk all the time. And then he keeps his wife's dead body. And what was that? Well, that wasn't Debra Paget.
It reminded me a lot of Fall of the House of Ushers, but
a whole lot.
You know, where the fire breaks out of the house, and then Morella and Lenora return back to their original bodies, and then Lenora like smiles as her dead father, as her father's dead, and Morella is crackling as the flames consume the house. It's kind of like,
well, the daughter
it's very atmospheric, but it's very, very kind of
it echoes it quite a bit.
Yeah, it does have a lot of
I think it was the same.
It's not camp, but it does have that kind of. It felt like a stage play brought to a movie. It had that kind of. It's very stagey.
It almost looked like the same fire from the House of Usher.
It probably was.
They interjected a couple of scenes because I was like, you see the same boards in the ceiling. It was the same kind of fire. It's like, I bet you they used that same scene for some of it. And she's strangling him and everything. She comes back. But you almost knew. It's like, who keeps a dead person anyway around that long? What the fuck is wrong with you? It's like, why? Well,
I have quite a few dead people underneath my floorboards.
No, I wouldn't doubt it.
Is that wrong?
You're no, I probably I'd like to know what Isaac thinks about that.
Well, sometimes the smell can be a bit unbearable during the summertime.
A little bit. It's a little ripe, I'm sure.
But yeah, but I quite like that. And I think the Black Cat, I think, is quite good because it does take really dark themes and it puts a little bit of comedy in it.
Yeah, they did lighten it up a little bit because Herringbone was just a drunk. And then he meets Vincent Price, who's supposed to be, I believe he's Fortunato, is he not?
Yeah.
But it was just the way they played off each other, because I found myself giggling watching it because I don't think I remember seeing this before. And just Vincent Price, he had a comedic side to him that I didn't really realize he had, because I just wondering how many times they had to do takes when he was wine testing. I'm sure Peter Lorre, there's somewhere out there, there's bloopers of this somewhere of him laughing, because I couldn't take him seriously when he was tasting the wine. I kept laughing. It's like, God, I've been to wine tasting and I've never seen anybody do that. Just never,
Now I have to make a correction. When we did the Black Cat, when we did the 1930s film of the Black Cat,
right?
And we heard the story about the Black Cat auditions. Those Black Cat auditions actually weren't for that movie. The Black Cat auditions that Tom was talking about were actually for this film.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But so that's
that was all you.
So they did a casting call for Black Cats for the Black Cat segment in the Tales of Terror, and then they did have a winner sort of thing. Now I did like when they were buried. This is I did also like when the cops came in, and I like the way that kind of worked.
He kept telling him to shut up.
He was talking to himself, and he's kind of bragging about, getting the money and going to town, getting everyone drunk. And he goes, and I thought that the way they put the story together was actually a lot crisper than the Black Cat. Because the Black Cat, you're kind of like, you never find out why the cops show up at his house. Even in Telltale Heart, you don't know why the cops show up. But this one, I think they did a good way of like bringing why the cops showed up at his door and stuff like this.
Yeah, it's clearly he'd had too much to drink. He probably could have got away with it, but then he started talking to himself. I think his mind, wasn't he seeing animals throughout the whole movie? He was so drunk, he was hallucinating animals all the time.
Yeah, well, it did have that Roger Corman dream sequence where, where everything gets kind of wavy. Oh
my God, I know. Yeah.
So, and then I guess that brings us to the last story, which I basically have to sit there and say that this one is kind of, it's very gruesome, and I think they really captured the short story very, very well.
Yes, they did. That's why I love the story so much. This is one of the most gruesome stories, and I mean, I think it'd translate well in any century at this point, because the story is gruesome, and just the fact that they make Vincent Price out to be this really just this nice, decent human being with a beautiful wife. And of course you got Basil Rathbone, who's a butthead. He wants the wife and he's into hypnotizing him. He hypnotizes him and he leaves him like that forever. You know, he wanted to leave him like that forever just for whatever study he was doing. But on the other hand, he was coveting the man's wife on top of that, even though he wanted him to, you know, Valdemar wanted his wife to marry the good doctor and not the bad doctor. So there was a lot of playing on each other.
So, yeah, and I'd sit there and say, and then with Vladimir, putrid body rises from the bed and kills Carmichael. It's like,
I know he's trying. Well, he's basically trying to molest Mrs. Valdemar.
Yeah, but the thing is,
he's like, "Fuck this! I'm coming back." And he comes, and he's all putrefied and laying on the body. You don't know if he strangled him or what, or if the guy dies of fright.
Yeah. So. Sorry, I had to let the cat out. He had to go to the bathroom.
I could hear him mewling back there.
But he was sort of like scratching the papers, like, "Oh no, you're not pissing on the table."
I saw that.
Oh, yeah. So, but yeah, and I think that, and I like the way it was filmed. I did like when they went to hypnosis scene. We did get that 1960s psychedelic colors coming in.
Yeah,
and it did give us. I mean, it does. What I quite like about these Corman-Poe ones is that they kind of all link together, like in style and the way they're filmed. You know, all the ones that we covered, with all the Poe ones that we covered by Corman. You know, Mask of the Red Death, Fall of the House of Usher, this one. Something else we covered as well by Poe and Vincent Price.
New York Times really kind of beat on this film, said it was dull, absurd, and a trashy adaptation. But I really enjoyed it. Maybe it was just the time. Maybe he just didn't like it. Who knows?
Well, I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, all three films kind of deal with like
death.
I mean, this is the problem with kind of trilogy films, or the anthology films. And we are doing at the end of the season, we are doing another Poe anthology, which basically is The Black Cat and Kate we're talking about now, done by Two Evil Eyes, which is directed by George Romero and Vincent Price. George Romero and Dario Argento. And then of course we're doing, Mario Bava's trilogy of films as well, Black Sabbath. But the thing is that I think whenever you have a film of like three short stories, whether it was Twilight Zone or any of those kind of films that normally have a bunch of short stories put together into a film, I do think that they tend to always get trashed a little bit. But another reason why I think they get trashed is that sometimes, now there's a couple films that we've never covered on this show, which I think we're going to try to cover next year, which is Trick or Treat, and the other one that they did was a Christmas Horror Story.
Yeah.
And now they do like a bunch of different stories, but they meld them together. So basically, you're going from story to story, but it's all very seamless.
Has something to do with the other, yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's when it becomes thing. But I think when you do have films like this where they are like separate stories and there's nothing really hinging them. I mean, the only thing that really hinges these stories is that Vincent Price is in every single one.
Right.
But I have to just say, out of these kind of films, I would sit there and say that Morella is still very, very good. I enjoyed it. The Black Cat I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed the last one. And I think that they work really well together, or you could take them apart and they could work on their own.
Well, it does show Vincent Price. I mean, I think Vincent Price just loved what he did. He was never going to be an Oscar-nominated Gone with the Wind kind of, but he embraced what he did. And I think that's why it makes it so good, because you really can appreciate. I love Vincent Price. I love all of his movies. I mean, even if I'm sitting here watching regular cable, if I see there's a movie by Vincent Price, it's like one of those Sundays, I'll sit there and watch it just because I love him so much. I'll even ignore the commercials.
Yeah, I'm a huge Vincent Price fan. I mean, I bought 3 Blu-ray box sets of his, and yeah, I can't get enough of Vincent. I mean, yeah,
it's a shame he wasn't around to see all the good special effects and get involved in it. I think what is the last thing he did? I know he did
Edward Scissorhands.
Was it Edward Scissorhands?
Yeah, and then he died after that.
Oh God, yeah, that's right. Man, time flies. really does.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. He probably would have got lost in things today. So anyway, I mean, I think we're quite lucky with Vincent Price because he left his mark on horror. He left his mark on a lot of classic films like Gaslight and The Fly, the original Fly, and all these.
The Fly. I just every time I think of The Fly, help me. He's got the human head on the body of a fly. He's in the cobweb, and there's the spider.
But even in his later career, I mean, we still got, the Tim Burton short called Vincent, which if you get a chance to watch it, it's fantastic. It's about a boy who wants to be Vincent Price. And with stop motion animation, we have the Thriller, Michael Jackson's Thriller. Yeah. He's always, and that song's never going to die.
No, it's not. So. I mean, whoever, I don't know if Michael Jackson thought of using Vincent Price voice in that or what, but it was pure genius. It really was.
Yeah. So it's it's very, very good that we had that. I think Vincent Price is going to be around for a very long time, and
I guess it was his time then. You're probably right. He probably wouldn't have been as relevant now as he was then.
Yeah,
but it was his time probably, and it's timeless now because of it. I don't care what you say. Vincent Price is just.
Well, I really can't see like Lady Gaga or Rhiannon or Beyonce using Vincent Price. So
no, not at all. No.
But if you were, if you grew up when we grew up, Vincent Price used to be on Saturday matinees, Monster Movie Matinee.
Movie Matinee, yep.
Or
SYR, Syracuse.
Yeah. But, and you talk to everyone the world over who's around our age period. We all grew up with Vincent Price movies because they used to always show them on TV. So nowadays they don't show anything. You have to look for it if you want to see something. So
yeah, absolutely.
So I guess we'll go to our final thoughts. So Vicky, what are your final thoughts of the short stories and the movie adaptations?
I actually love the short stories of Edgar Allan Poe because you can get the short stories a whole lot easier. And these were all really like morbid tales. And it just really shows where his brain was at because I can't imagine being a psychologist or a psychiatrist having to analyze the brain of Edgar Allan Poe because it was so dark and probably so deep. And he was probably in the throes of laudanum and alcohol, and he still could spit out a story. I love all these stories. Like I said, they were quick reads. I knocked them out in probably 45 minutes. If you're into this time or, even into this kind of genre of writing, I highly suggest it because they're just great stories. They're timeless. And as far as Tales of Terror, great. I don't believe I've ever saw it before. This is the first time I believe I remember seeing it. If I did, I don't recall it. And Vincent Price is just enormously phenomenal in all of the stories. He just right across the board. It just shows how diverse his acting can go. And like I said, I would really like to research the bloopers for some of this because, I mean, they must have been some good ones. Somebody has these somewhere in a vault, they have to be around somewhere. But no, I mean, it was a great, I watched it twice. I loved it so much. And I mean, if you're one of those people, it's like sit back and watch, this type of, horror movie or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't have all the fancy special effects and whatnot, but it's just timeless, and it's just stuff that people built on after, Corman made stuff like this. He did, I think, inspire directors later on down the pike. But I loved it. I just can't find nothing wrong with it, really. What about you?
Well, I mean, this film took 3 weeks to film.
Yeah, it didn't take long. I forgot about that, yeah.
So, I mean, it's quite interesting.
Can you imagine how throwing it together? That's why I'm telling you, that was the same fire from the Fall House.
Yeah, they did. I'm just reading it here. They reused some sets and event footage from the fiery climax of House of Usher.
I was going to say, I was wondering, because it looked like the same boards at the ceiling and everything else, and you could tell they had to superimpose the same strangulating scene. Yeah, that's great, though, that they did that. I mean, only someone like me would probably notice it. Someone like you would notice it, too.
Well, yeah, I kind of just watched it and kind of washed over my head, but I think I watched it because I was like really tired when I came home from work, but yesterday, like I better watch this or else I'm going to get to it, sort of thing. So for me, actually, I think these are some of the strongest short stories of Poe's. They are, and I have to say, 3 of the short stories are classic. Morella's probably the one that's probably not as classic as the other ones.
Right.
But it's still, all the stories carry a hell of a punch with them. And
They
they're
do.
all very, very dark. but they're all very, very calculated as well. That's what I quite like about them. And I have to say, even today, when you kind of get to, when you get to the end of each of these stories, it's kind of shocking, really, that because there's no happy ending for anything.
There are never any happy endings. Edgar Allan Poe never. I mean, like you said, the closest thing we got was the Murders at the Rue Morgue, but that wasn't happy. People died. They got shoved in chimneys. They got beaten to death by an orangutan. So now there was never any happy. It's all dark. Like I said.
Well, another interesting thing is that like we get the black cat where the guy gets caught. Morella, I mean, the guy kind of gets away with it, though he might be haunted in his own memory. The cask, basically, the murderer gets away with that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's kind of like interesting that we're also getting stories that, after, like in the 1900s, it's almost like if you were guilty of something, you had to be caught. There had to be a justice done. But here, sometimes you don't get justice with Edgar Allan Poe, and that's what I quite like about him. So you're kind of going, huh? Oh. Sort of thing. As far as the film is concerned, I think the film is a classic. They did do a sequel to this film called Thrice of Terrors, basically where they do 3 Nathaniel Hawthorne horror stories.
Another dark author.
Yeah, another dark one. So, but I really like this. But then again, I think I'm very partial to Vincent Price films. I do like this one a lot. I love Peter Lorre. It's kind of like you got Peter Lorre and Basil Rathbone and Vincent Price, and it's
got the heavy hitters in there.
Want. Yeah, and every time you got those, and every once in a while, you'll see a film and they'll throw in Boris Karloff in there, and oh my God, this is great. It's kind of like all the great people, and you just realize how they could take something so simple and make it so effective.
Right.
Because you can't stop watching them. You can't take your eyes off them. You're just kind of like glued to them. So, yeah. So I highly suggest these 4 short stories and the film, Tales of Terror from 1962. So I guess that brings us to the end of the Literary License Podcast episode of Edgar Allan Poe this week. Next month, we are doing Edgar Allan Poe's The Oblong Box. No, we're doing the Premature Burial. That's what we're doing now. Another fun story.
Another happy ending.
We're doing the Premature Burial next month. Of course, our 2-for-1 episode for our next episode will be Hereditary and Midsummer, which are both directed by Ari Aster.
Those are both best movies.
And our European horror film is Eyes Without a Face, which is a classic French film that is probably the goriest thing you're going to see in black and white, which is very interesting, from 1960. And of course, we're doing 2 Dark Shadows episodes this month as well. So what we want to do is make sure that you can follow us and make sure you sign up to our newsletter, which you can find at www.llpodcast.com, and sign up to subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out once a month. And of course, you can follow us on our social media, which is Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, and Tumblr, and Goodreads, and various other platforms. And of course, if you're listening to us on your favorite place, we're also available on Amazon Alexa now. So all you have to do is go to Amazon Alexa, say, Alexa, go to the Literary License Podcast.
Every time you do that, you set off my Alexa.
And it will open up the Literary License Podcast, and you can pick which episode you want to listen to. So we are now on Amazon, and we would like to thank you, Amazon, for that lovely invite.
Yes.
And we will see you next week. So until that time, it's good night for myself, and good night, Vicki.
Good night, everybody.
And we'll see you next week with Hereditary and Midsummer.
This has been a literary license podcast production. Good night.